Welcome back to the series on ignorance. This week I'm going to explore known unknowns versus unknown unknowns. The difference between the known and unknown is fundamentally about awareness of ignorance. Known unknowns are the gaps in knowledge that you are aware of. You know what it is that you don't know. You might not know the population of Kenya, but you are aware this is a question with an answer that you could look up. In business, you might not know your competition's next move, but you know this uncertainty exists and you can plan around it. These are the questions you can anticipate, the risks you can identify and try to mitigate. Unknown unknowns, on the other hand, are the things you don't know that you don't know. You lack awareness that there is a gap in your knowledge. These are the blind spots that catch you completely off guard. Think of the 2008 financial crisis. Many institutions weren't just uncertain about whether mortgage-backed securities would fail. They didn't comprehend the systemic interconnections that amplified the collapse. The risk wasn't on their radars at all. This concept came to the public attention through Donald Rumsfeld's 2002 press conference. Though the concept existed in philosophical and risk management theory well before that, the danger is that you can't prepare for what you can't imagine. They are the source of black swan events, highly impactful events that can seem obvious only in hindsight. The practical challenge is trying to convert the unknowns into knowns through diverse thinking, scenario planning, red team thinking, and intellectual humility. You can't eliminate them, but you can try to create more resilient systems. Philosophically, this touches on some deep questions about the nature and limits of knowledge itself. At its core, it reveals a hierarchy of epistemic self-awareness. Socrates said, "I know that I know nothing." He knew the boundaries of his knowledge. Known unknowns represent this Socratic wisdom, metacognitive awareness about the limits of what you understand. You're operating at a higher level of consciousness about your own epistemic state. Unknown unknowns expose something more troubling. We can't achieve complete self-transparency about our own ignorance. There is an irreducible opacity to what we don't know. You might think you've mapped out all of the questions worth asking in a particular domain, but you are inevitably missing entire categories that haven't occurred to you. The very structure of your framing determines what questions become visible or remain invisible. This connects to the problem of induction that Hume identified. We assume the future will resemble the past, but reality might operate according to principles we haven't encountered yet. Every scientific revolution emerged from unknown unknowns. People weren't just wrong, they lacked the conceptual vocabularies to even ask the right questions. There's a paradox here. The moment you become aware of an unknown unknown, it turns into a known unknown. You can't directly observe your own blind spots while they remain blind spots. You can never know how much you don't know. The possibilities are unmappable. Some argue this means we should adopt kind of an epistemic modesty, building resilience rather than trying to achieve comprehensive knowledge. Others see it as an argument for radical skepticism about our ability to predict or plan. Nassim Taleb argues that unknown unknowns dominate outcomes in complex systems, making many forms of expertise illusory. There's also a phenomenological aspect. what it's like to suddenly realize you experienced an unknown unknown. That feeling of the ground shifting under you. It's cognitively disorienting in a way that just learning new facts isn't. Back to Hume. His problem of induction questions our justification for reasoning from past observations to future predictions. The basic argument: we observe that the sun has risen every day throughout recorded history, so we expect it to rise tomorrow. But what justifies this expectation? We can't use logic alone. There is no logical contradiction in the sun not rising tomorrow. And we can't justify it through experience. That would be circular reasoning, using past observations to justify the reliability of using past observations. Hume concluded that induction rests on habit and custom, not rational foundations. We are wired to expect patterns to continue, but we have no grounds for assuming nature is uniform. Unknown unknowns represent precisely the possibility that nature operates according to principles or contains forces that we've never encountered. When you make an inductive prediction, you are implicitly assuming there are no unknown unknowns. Hume's insight is that we can never have complete confidence that we've seen all the ways the world can behave. Unknowns are the permanent gap between observed regularity and justified confidence. Every inductive inference carries an assumption that there is nothing I'm unaware of that would disrupt this pattern. That is an assumption that is impossible to justify. Nassim Taleb is a mathematician, philosopher, and former options trader. He has built much of his career around unknown unknowns. His core argument is that in complex systems, markets, societies, ecosystems, unknowns, what he calls black swans, have vastly disproportionate outcomes compared to predictable events. A black swan is an event that is highly improbable based on past experience, has extreme consequences, and only seems predictable in hindsight. He argues that most experts are dangerously overconfident by essentially assuming unknown unknowns either don't exist or don't matter. But history is full of black swans. World War I, the internet, 9/11, the 2008 crisis. Not just unlikely, but outside most people's conceptual frameworks. His practical conclusion is building systems assuming you are fundamentally ignorant about what could happen. Then there's the phenomenological aspect of this, the way you experience encountering one of these unknowns, what it feels like. It's not the same as learning something you didn't know, like the population of Kenya, not just filling in a blank. It's like there is a cognitive or emotional rupture, like a conceptual vertigo, disorienting. It's not just updating your map. It's realizing your map book was missing entire pages you never knew existed to begin with. Imagine learning your partner had been unfaithful. It's not just the shock of betrayal. It's the sudden realization that maybe everything you knew about them was based on an entire dimension you were completely unaware of. You weren't just questioning if they might be cheating. The possibility hadn't even occurred to you. The revelation forces a retroactive reinterpretation of everything you thought you understood. Or in your own thinking, maybe you encounter a perspective, evolutionary psychology, queer theory, whatever it may be, that just doesn't add information, but changes how you see the world. These may not be the best examples, but it is difficult to think of things that you haven't thought of. But there's an unsettling feeling like, how did I not know about this before? What else am I missing? Before the revelation, there's a kind of naive confidence, not about knowing everything, but about knowing the kinds of things you don't know. After the revelation, there is a lingering uncertainty, a heightened awareness that your current framework might be limited in ways you just can't perceive. It's one thing to acknowledge blind spots without feeling the emotional weight of it. I'm sure there are things I'm not considering. It's another thing to feel the weight of that ignorance, to have genuine humility about it, rather than a sort of performative uncertainty. Some might find this paralyzing. How do you make any decisions when you know you are fundamentally ignorant? Others might find it liberating, a reduced pressure to have everything figured out. There's also the odd experience of trying to reach toward these blind spots, trying to think about the unthinkable, imagine the unimaginable. You can feel the limitations without being able to transcend them. Unknown unknowns are phenomenologically absent until they are not, at which point they are no longer unknown unknowns. You never experience them as such. Only the sudden emergence or the abstract possibility of them. They exist in a perpetual phenomenological blind spot. It is practically impossible to generate an unknown unknown. You are trying to use your existing conceptual apparatus to imagine what lies outside of that apparatus, or what that apparatus is not able to help you see. The most reliable ways these get revealed are external collisions, encountering something that doesn't fit any of your categories, like indigenous peoples meeting Europeans for the first time. The encounter forced recognition of the possibilities that hadn't existed before. Structural breaks are another way, when systems behave in ways your models can't accommodate. The 2008 financial crisis wasn't just worse than expected. It revealed connections and failure modes that sophisticated models hadn't incorporated because the architects of those models couldn't imagine them. Paradigm shifts from outside of your field. Someone from another discipline looks at your domain and asks questions that seem bizarre to you because they aren't constrained by your field's assumptions. Accidents and mistakes, penicillin, microwaves, post-it notes, you stumble into them while looking for something else entirely. They resist deliberate discovery. Maybe the best you can do is to be open to surprise, surround yourself with people who think differently, and try to build systems that won't fail catastrophically when the unimaginable occurs. The paradox is that the harder you try to eliminate them, the more you're just turning them into known unknowns, which has value, but it doesn't solve the deeper, ever-present problem. While converting unknown unknowns into known unknowns is productive, even if it doesn't solve the larger problem, in problem solving, each time you do this, it expands your conceptual map, possibly reveals adjacent possibilities you couldn't see before, sometimes actually solves a problem, and at the very least, it reduces the space your ignorance fills, even if you can never eliminate it. The fact that it is a permanent feature of finite minds can help shape how we should act with humility, adaptability, robustness against surprise. We can't solve our way out of unknown unknowns, but we can learn to live and work in ways that acknowledge them. There are lots of practical strategies in many domains, from organization, decision-making, engineering and design, finance, scientific research, product development, national security. That's probably another video worth of stuff that doesn't really interest me as much as the personal aspects of this concept. Cultivating intellectual humility and comfort with uncertainty is a good place to start. People who are psychologically rigid or need to feel in control tend to dismiss possibilities that don't fit their models. Those who can say, "I don't know," or "I might be completely wrong about this," are in a better position to recognize and deal with these things when they show up. Diversity of perspectives, background, cognitive styles are very practical in group settings. Homogeneous groups tend to share blind spots, your bubble friends. There are some interesting psychological dimensions, questions about how our minds handle or fail to handle this kind of uncertainty. Some people have a high need for cognitive closure. They want definite answers, very clear categories of things. Unknown unknowns are psychologically intolerable because they represent a kind of irreducible uncertainty. They tend to prematurely close off questioning things, settling on explanations even when evidence is thin. The discomfort of open questions is too much. The illusion of explanatory depth. They systematically overestimate how well they know things. Ask someone to explain in detail how a zipper works. We live with these kinds of illusions constantly, feeling like we know how the world works when we have a cursory understanding at best, false confidence. Dunning-Kruger, which we will get to in another episode. Confirmation bias and motivated reasoning. We unconsciously filter information to confirm our existing beliefs. This means unknown unknowns that would challenge our worldview are especially likely to remain invisible. We aren't just passively failing to notice them. We are actively defending against their emergence. Our egos are heavily invested in our current model of reality. Anxiety and defensive foreclosure. Unknowns can trigger existential anxiety for some people. If you can't map your ignorance, you can't feel safe. This can lead to a defensive psychology, either denial, as in "I've thought of everything," or paralysis, as in "I can't act because anything could happen." Neither response is adaptive, but both are comprehensible. The availability heuristic. We judge likelihood based on how easily examples come to mind. By definition, unknown unknowns aren't mentally available, so we systematically underweigh their probability. Our intuitive risk assessment is fundamentally biased towards known possibilities. Narrative coherence and hindsight bias. We are storytelling creatures. We need events to make sense. After an unknown unknown reveals itself, we immediately construct a narrative where it was obvious in retrospect or inevitable. This obscures how genuinely unforeseeable it was, which prevents us from learning the lesson that we are always more ignorant than we think. Identity and intellectual humility. For many people, admitting ignorance, especially profound, unmappable ignorance, threatens their self-concept. If you derive identity from being knowledgeable or competent, unknown unknowns are a threat to your ego. Cultivating genuine intellectual humility requires work, decoupling your self-worth from certainty. Psychology of discovery. There's something interesting about people who are good at uncovering unknown unknowns. They tend to have curiosity that's not satisfied by existing answers, comfort with confusion, willingness to look stupid by asking basic questions, and a cognitive flexibility that allows them to abandon frameworks that aren't working. Kind of a childlike wonder, not taking their current map of reality as final. Group psychology and pluralistic ignorance. Sometimes everyone in a group has private doubts but assumes everyone else is certain, so no one voices uncertainty. The unknowns remain hidden, not because individuals can't perceive it, but because social dynamics prevent its articulation. It takes someone finally saying, "Wait, has anyone considered?" to break the spell. There's also a connection to existential psychology too. Unknown unknowns are a specific instance of the broader human condition of being thrown into a world we didn't choose and can't fully comprehend. Some philosophies, existentialism, Buddhism, frame wisdom in part as accepting this fundamental groundlessness rather than defending against it. So I'm going to leave you with a few questions to ponder about this. Don't try to answer the first thing that comes to mind, and don't feel obligated to answer publicly. To what extent is your sense of control over your life based on unknown unknowns simply not having materialized yet? Think about the areas where you feel most secure or confident: relationships, career, health, worldview. How much of that confidence rests on the absence of disruption rather than genuine understanding of all relevant factors? What would it mean to hold your certainties more lightly without becoming paralyzed? When you think about your own cognitive and emotional blind spots, what psychological needs might be served by keeping certain unknowns hidden from yourself? Are there questions you're not asking because the answers might be destabilizing? What role does self-protection play in maintaining your blind spots, and what might you gain or lose by being more curious about the edges of your understanding? I hope this has been interesting, enjoyable, useful. Putting this together really opened my eyes to some things about myself. I hope it has helped you to understand maybe a little more than you might have before. Let me know down in the comments. Always, thanks for watching.